Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Afghanistan podcast. I've been meaning today, I was hoping to speak to discuss the fast, rapidly changing relationships between US, Europe, Ukraine, and Russia. And in this regard, I've got a very special guest with us, no stranger to the podcast. Eric Margolis has been with us previously. So thank you, Eric, for joining us today.
I was happy to be back with you, especially at this very crucial moment.
Seriously, as I was saying off camera just now, I wanted to have you on anyway, but all of a sudden, everything's gone belly up, it seems like. So tell me, first of all, I can't believe like Trump has only been in office like maybe just over 6 weeks, and so much has happened. It's like unbelievable.
Well, he's been brooding about this for years, and there's plenty of time to fill his head with ideas of revenge and revolution. And what he's doing, he's giving Europe a big kick in the pants, which it probably needs.
I think it was overdue, but I didn't think it would come this fast and this hard.
No, well, he's a man in a rush. He's heading towards 80 years old soon. He saw what happened to Biden, and he wants to get his work or his plans done before he gets too old.
I think this is probably what scares Europe even more so. Not only what's happening, but how quickly it's happening, and how it's only 6 weeks and there's 4 years to go.
Well, you're right. Trump has shown up Europe's divisions and its vulnerabilities and its weakness, and Europe has been relying on America too much,
Yeah.
and is now paying the price.
So tell me, I think it was the 28th of February when we had that spat in the Oval Office between Trump and Zelensky. What were your thoughts watching that? My jaw was on the floor.
I thought it was great television. It was absolutely fascinating. It looked like a prearranged stick-up where they ganged up on him. And remember that about a week before, Trump had called Zelensky a dictator.
Yeah.
Very undiplomatic talk. And so it just shows that there was trouble coming. And Trump has been vociferous about wanting to end the war in Ukraine and stop pouring tens of millions of US dollars into this conflict.
Yes. You're right. When I was watching it immediately afterwards, I was thinking it seems premeditated. It seems like there was a game plan. But now, the more I look into it, we can kind of think about it as having a good game plan on both sides. Because yes, we could say that Trump and Vance probably were ready for this kind of a scenario and give him like a public dressing down. But on the other hand, we had just before this Oval Office meeting, we had the president of France coming over, then the British Prime Minister coming over, and then Zelensky coming over, and with more or less the same kind of the same message, the same requests, and to some extent, it feels like they also had a plan where they were going to kind of just keep insisting, and the way Zelensky challenged Trump so publicly in the Oval Office, it seems meditated on his part as well, and I think it really backfired.
Well, it's certainly political theater, and I don't know what the Europeans' plan was to do. They're like a bunch of chickens running around now, trying to figure out what their next moves are going to be. I think this is the inevitable result brought to a head by Trump of decades and decades of European reliance on the United States, but military reliance. But what you might also say from a different point of view is that why is the United States Army still in Germany 80 years after World War II?
Yeah,
And is this really what Europe wants, or is America's troops are still as acting like an occupying power?
true. Also, I'm thinking, how do you see what happened after the Oval Office meeting? How there was a meeting in London with all European heads of state and Zelensky there, and the statements that came out from there. I just feel like they kind of they're repeating the same mistake that Zelensky made in the Oval Office, in that they were insisting that they need some kind of a security guarantee from the U.S., and that's what kind of tripped Trump. And they're repeating the same mistake, and I think they might get the same kind of treatment if they're not careful.
Well, they might. Ukraine, Zelensky's people, their objective is to get the U.S. into a war with Russia.
Mm.
That's their ultimate goal, which Trump, quite rightfully, is trying to prevent. We don't like
Yeah,
his style, but the his objective is right. We're heading towards World War III, which will certainly go nuclear because of defense reductions on both sides,
yes,
and ironically, and we that's what the Ukrainians want, just the way the Israelis are trying to get the United States involved in a war against Iran. Everybody wants America to do their heavy lifting or dirty work or whatever you call it.
yes.
It won't work, I think.
Before Trump came along, and the way Biden's administration was dealing the whole Russian affair, they just seemed like there was no off ramp, and it just kept escalating. And it seemed like nuclear war was becoming more and more inevitable. I just couldn't see a way out of this situation. And now things have completely changed, and I think that from that point of view, Trump is right. If Ukraine wants or Europe wants a security guarantee where um, if things escalate further, then the US will have to come in. Basically, they're then allowing a situation where Ukraine decides if US goes to war with Russia or not.
Well, yes. I've been horrified by this whole thing. Having a long time war correspondent, I see
Yes,
all the pieces falling into place for a major thermonuclear clash, for a war which, when it began, I remember writing was stupid. And why are we getting involved in this fight for Luhansk?
yeah.
And Donetsk base, and these are places nobody cares about or nobody's ever heard about. And we're repeating the mistakes of the past.
Starmer's come out and said that we're going to give Ukraine, what, $1.8 billion of weapons, but that's going to come over 5 years. So what use is that going to be? And then he's also talking about that we're ready to have UK boots on the ground and planes in the air. But then he qualified that by saying, but we need US guarantees.
The British don't have enough troops even to manage traffic in Piccadilly Circus. Uh, Britain is so weak and so feeble that this is all bluster and baloney.
But the problem is they don't realize. I heard someone say that Europe is a collection of small nations that don't realize they're small.
Well, that's a good description. Uh, what we need in this situation, in my humble view, is another Congress of Vienna. That was the huge meeting that ended the Napoleonic Wars and really settled up Europe's border questions for 100 years, more or less, not including to Eastern Europe as usual, but certainly for Western Europe. That's when Belgium was created. Zelensky was just with the King of Belgium yesterday. Um, Belgium is an important country, but the European nations need to get their act together first before they come to the Russians and the Americans and talk about it.
Yes. Isn't it ironic that Europe, after World War II, decided the fate of the whole world without taking any local sentiments into consideration, and now they feel like the same's being dealt to them, and they don't like it at all. But they're not on the table of negotiations. They're not on the driving seat.
What was funny was in the 1960s and 70s, the Americans were nagging the Germans and saying, please be more German, be more warlike. Come on, add more tank divisions. And the Germans didn't want to do it. And that's another point that is rarely discussed, and that is that the European public is not warlike. They don't want to spend any money, pay more taxes to buy tanks, which they're not going to use. There's a very, very strong anti-military sentiment in Europe, and rightfully so, and as well in Russia.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service. So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and am a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode. Trump in the Oval Office was saying to Zelensky that we enabled you to become a tough guy, and you go and you talk tough, but that's because we backed you and we allowed you to talk tough. And the same applies to Europe. Europe is still trying to talk tough, but they don't realize that they have nothing without the US.
That's right. Napoleon once prayed, oh Lord, if I must go to war, please make it against a coalition. And he could chip at the different parts and pull it apart, which he did very successfully.
That's a very good point. And that's what I'm thinking as well, that because now Europe is trying to mentally prepare for a scenario where NATO might be dead for all intents and purposes, and they will have to sort out their own security. And when they do that and they start building their own troops, at some point they're going to start, at the moment they're seeing Russia as a threat. At some point they're going to start seeing each other as threats as well then, because NATO and all of the security umbrella, if it was kind of keeping them together as well. So they're going to start, at some stage, they're going to start realizing, hang on, we need to defend ourselves against France and Germany and Italy and Hungary and all of these countries.
And they have to find a way of turning the Chinese into a dreadful threat to justify whatever military spending they're going to be. I wish we could just make an agreement to end all military spending. And devote the money for a year to cancer research. That's my particular plan. We can live with it for a year without billions of military spending, though there is a very strong built-in support for continued military spending because of the way the military in the U.S. particularly, but also Europe, has structured its defense manufacturing programs to be in every state in the U.S. and every small town is making tanks and things like this. And people rely on this. They count on it.
Yes. And I would be surprised if in the near future we might see one or two countries, I'm even thinking Germany, might be joining the BRICS.
I don't know about that. The Germans are so confused right now. The rug has been pulled out from under them. they've got a better government now
Yeah.
with the center CDU CSU union, but Germany needs to grow up. Germany is, as I wrote in my last column, Germany's been a militarily occupied country for
Yeah.
1945. And why are there all these American troops in Germany? Russia can barely wage war against Ukrainians. The idea of Russia invading all of the Western Europe is fanciful.
Mm.
Could be done. Remember, during World War II, I was just reading about the Russian campaign in Eastern Asia and in Xinjiang and Manchuria,
Yeah.
where the Russians were 100 million troops, 10 million troops into this. They could raise very large armies, but they don't want to. And Putin himself said repeatedly that Russia does not want to spend any more on defense, and they were going to rely more on nuclear weapons. This was a decade ago. They were cut down on conventional forces and rely on nuclear weapons. And now we're in the situation where they're threatening to use their nuclear forces because their conventional forces are not strong enough.
Yeah. This is the thing, because Europe has put themselves in this state of frenzy where they're coming up with these imaginary scenarios that are kind of in contrast to what the reality in front of them. So when Putin says that if you keep providing Ukraine with weapons that can strike inside Russia, then we will respond with nuclear weapons. And Europe says, no, he's bluffing. And when Putin says, hang on, we have no intention of escalating this war into Europe, again they say, no, he's bluffing. He does want to march into Europe, but just don't believe him. We know what his real intentions are.
Well, we here in the West, our favorite pastime is demonizing foreign leaders, Gaddafi
Yeah.
and Ahmadinejad, whatever his name was in Iran, and Arafat, you name it.
Yeah. And it's the same politicians. They've been doing it so long, for decades. They can't now think in any other way.
They need them. They really do. Everybody's demonizing President Putin, who's not a sweet man by any means. He did terrible things to the Chechens, committed terrible
Yeah.
atrocities on them, which I certainly don't forget. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, he's not the monster who's going to contact. We heard this all through World War II propaganda. Surely we've heard enough by now.
Yeah. If also, because at the moment everyone is looking at, we're looking at personalities like Trump, Biden, Zelensky. But if we look at it from a state point of view, it is bizarre. So we have like the US pushes Europe into this situation where they keep insisting that they're going to bring NATO to the border of Russia, and they're going to, at some stage, Ukraine may become a member of NATO. Western Europe is kind of reluctant and trying to tell the USA that don't push Russia too far, because this is a clear red line that he's been talking about for years. And if we keep pushing, he's going to react. But US keeps pushing, takes us into a war. Now Europe's in the war as well. And now at that point, USA backs off and they say, no, this is a European war. It's got nothing to do with us. So it's just such a bizarre situation where the leaders of Ukraine and the leaders of all of Europe, they basically allowed themselves to be played. Are you there, Eric?
Yeah, I'm here. I stopped hearing you for a moment. Yes, it is a bizarre situation. And, one thing I cannot forget as a journalist, I was there when it happened, was that the United States in the words of its own Undersecretary of State, overthrew the last Ukrainian government.
Yes.
And CIA did it. She said it cost them $5 billion to stage the coup. So the Zelensky government that we have is a U.S. imposed government in Ukraine, just the way it was after the U.S. overthrew the government in Iran and put in their own people. And we have even on tape, we have this awful woman who's the State Department neoconservative struggling with the names of the puppets that they were put into power. The point is that we overthrew this government. It's now our government. And to claim that it's a saintly, independent government is just not accurate.
There's now been recently a statement from UK, France, and Germany that they're going to use the funds that they've confiscated from Russia, I think 300 billion euros or something, and they're going to use those to manufacture weapons that they're going to provide Ukraine. And by doing so, they themselves are saying that they're going to basically put a spanner in the works for any potential deal that Trump may do with Putin. So if they're talking in those terms, then they are putting themselves at a collision course with Trump.
Which they may live to regret. But we also have to remember that the French, being French, will also put their own spanner into the works, and they won't let the British get the upper hand on the thing. And so Europe's policy is by no means consistent or unified.
Yes. Actually, that reminds me, I think just 3 days before Trump's inauguration, UK has done some deal with Ukraine where like a 100-year partnership where they will provide security and reconstruction. I think that the entire kind of the details of that deal is not in public yet, but that would be a cause for worry for all the other coalition partners, USA, France, Germany. They will think like, why are we standing back? Why aren't we in there making similar deals?
It's very interesting. I was in KGB headquarters and in the KGB museum in Moscow, where they have artifacts, relics from their 1920s, 1917. And there I was looking at the books and the personal effects of Sidney Riley, who was the famous British spy, known as the Ace of Spies, who was sent by Britain to overthrow the Bolshevik government that came to power in 1917-18. And it's incredible that Britain's policy remains staunchly anti-Soviet. The British royal family is very anti-Soviet. The British are really permanent enemies of the Russians. So we can't expect any different policy from the British.
It's true. I don't understand why that is so kind of deeply ingrained. But yeah,
I don't either, except that some Bolshevik must have once threatened the Queen or something like "His Majesté," as the French call it, and the British can't forget it.
So how do you see, like, from where we are now, and from the mindset of all the key players? Do you see, because now Europe's even been talking about like having ceasefire for like a month or 2 months. There's no way Putin is going to allow that. So I don't know what they're talking about, and they're also talking about like European peacekeeping troops in Ukraine, which is another stupid idea because unless Putin agrees, what kind of peacekeeping? What are they going to enforce? What will be the rules of the game? What happens when bullets start being shot from both sides. What are they going to do in that kind of a situation? So it's difficult for me to understand at the moment where this goes. Do you think Trump and Putin will just keep pushing and come to some agreement despite what Europe is thinking, or are they going to bring Europe to the table at some point?
I do think they will come to, as Trump would call it, a deal. Neither side really wants this war. And even though the Ukrainians are making tons of money on it, it's something that's never discussed, but they've grown
Yes.
rich on U.S. aid. It's a very corrupt country.
Yeah.
I like them. I admire them. I've got all kinds of awards from the Ukrainians for being a supporter of the Ukrainians. I have sympathy for them, but I don't agree with their war against Moscow. And the Russians are very determined people. We know when they start off all their wars badly and fumble and make kinds of terrible, stupid mistakes. But then eventually they get their act together, and they're doing it now. I think from my observation, what Russia's doing in Ukraine, they're not fighting a full-scale war. They're fighting a limited war with limited numbers of troops, trying not to inflict minimal damage on Ukraine, hoping they may get it back one day. You know, we never hear from the pro-Russian Ukrainians. We only hear from the anti-Russian, anti-nationalist Ukrainians. And one day they may want it back. They may resume power. There may be a coup in Kiev, which is highly likely. It would kick out Zelensky.
Yeah. Although now I'm thinking, so the pro-Russian Ukrainians are now part of Russia, and they're not going to come back to Ukraine. So that means the people that are left behind in Ukraine are going to be even more anti-Russia than before. So that's going to be a problem. But also, if there is a peace deal at some stage, if the war stops, I don't see much future left for Zelensky. I don't know what's going to happen to him, because he's already been getting death threats apparently from like the neo-Nazis in his country.
Well, yes, and they've been delivering death threats against pro-Russian groups too, and trying to kill them. It's a very ugly mess in Ukraine. We do not want to get involved in Ukrainian internal politics. The horror show. We'll never be done with it, and nobody wants to understand the problems of that. So it would be best if the Ukrainians could make a deal that would put them in sort of a neutral position. I really...
Where they should have been from the beginning, they could have been taking advantage from both sides and got the best out of Europe, got the best out of Russia, stayed neutral, and concentrated on their economy. It's ridiculous how they've got to where they are now.
Ukraine used to be a major industrial power. I almost bought a factory in Ukraine, so I have some limited knowledge of this. And but the corruption in Ukraine was so bad that I didn't want to get involved for any amount of money.
Oh, wow. When Europeans talk about, when they criticize Trump for going in, trying to get peace too quickly, what is their solution? The only other alternative solution to that is to keep fighting, which means both sides keep losing lives, but at the same time, Russia keeps gaining more ground. So the longer we leave it, Ukraine's going to be in a worse situation. If anything, they could have taken this deal in 2022.
They should have, but they're being run by hotheads, nationalist hotheads in Ukraine, who have a tremendous propaganda machine supplied to them by the Americans. And they have convinced themselves that they're winning the war. They're not, but they're drinking their own Kool-Aid.
Yes, this is the thing. They have convinced themselves of the ridiculous propaganda they've been talking about. Russia's losing. Russia's lost more lives than Ukraine Putin is ill, Putin is dying. So all sorts of
Exactly.
things.
A lot of it comes from the British too, who remain master propagandists. They've forgotten how to make good cars, but they certainly know how to churn out effective propaganda. The same kind of propaganda that brought America into World War One. They're now leading every story. They have a direct feed at the BBC into the Ukrainian propaganda ministry.
What's happening with the tariff wars and what's happening with the situation between USA and Canada?
Very bad. Very, very distressing for people who live in Canada, for Canadians who were always considered themselves America's best friend
Yeah,
and faithful, loyal allies. And Canadians are a very peaceful, peace loving,
yeah.
gentle people. They don't want stress and opposition. This situation has got them into a horrible thing. Why is Trump doing this? Nobody can understand.
It
Uh,
came out of nowhere when he first talked about Canada being the 51st state. I was just kind of gobsmacked, but I was thinking, surely he knows he's joking. This is just beyond ridiculous. But he's not. He's serious about it.
he is, he watches TV constantly, and he picks up all these weird people from Fox News.
Yeah.
I met his people, and I didn't want to have anything to do with them there during the first administration. Wasn't my cup of tea,
Yeah.
but he has a lot of extremist people who are from the radical fringes. And if they catch Trump's attention one day in a TV program, that becomes the new U.S. policy. It's terrible. Canadians are so upset. Um, One of the world's nicest, most peaceful people,
It's true.
Canadians. Uh, they're gentle people who believe in good manners and civility, and
So true.
being held up now to all these rude comments from Trump, really shameful and subtle threats of invading Canada and Greenland and God knows where else, Panama.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not the Canadians are really upset. There are boycotts all over of American products here in Canada.
Yeah.
And, they, the people are really disturbed by it. Where
What are
this will
Canada's
lead.
what are Canada's options now? So if the tariffs remain in place, that's going to be devastating for Canada. So what are the options? Do you think that the retaliatory kind of tariffs and the fact that um, the the dollar, the market has reacted the way it has, do you think that might cause Trump to change his mind on this whole thing? Or
Yes, very possibly. He could wake up tomorrow and decide completely differently. He's very mercurial. But the point is that Canadians have really been hurt by this.
yeah,
In the Canadian psyche, there's always a lingering fear of invasion from the U.S. It always has been. Ultra Canadian history has happened, and Canadians don't deserve it and don't want it. But Trump hates young Trudeau,
mm,
the current prime minister. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because Trudeau legalized pot, or excuse me, uh,
it's
or
this whole woke thing. Is it the woke kind of how Trump is anti-woke and Tudor is quite on the left? Do you think that's it, or
he's certain Trudeau is. I mean, Canada is very leftish in its political opinions.
mm,
It makes the Democrats in the U.S. look like right wingers, but that's the Canadian way. It's sort of a harmless affectation in Canada. It doesn't matter to the United States. There are no Cuban missiles being implanted in Canada.
Yeah,
This just Canadians just like their social welfare systems and resent American brashness. The Americans are too threatening, boastful, banging on the table. Typical. Just Trump typifies everything that Canadians don't like about
yeah.
Americans. But Canadians are almost too polite to say anything. Almost.
And I think you're right. It is going to be difficult for them to kind of get over this whole, like, just psychologically in the future, to ever kind of go back to how things were before this whole thing started.
Well, maybe, but there's a big weight of inertia that is Canada and the U.S. are huge trading partners, and
Mm.
Mexico through it, and they need each other. They want each other's trade. I don't know why Trump started all this nonsense. We didn't need it, don't want it, and it's not going to do anyone any good. I think at the end of all this fussing and fighting, as the old Jamaican reggae song says, shooting and a looting, and we're going to go back to the way it was before.
I think I don't know if there's going to be at some stage tariffs coming for Europe as well. I think Trump has just been obsessed about, he thinks tariffs is the cure for all American problems. So he just seems like he's just going to keep pushing. Um, I think in the UK, everyone's kind of holding their breath as well to see what happens here.
Trump seems to have a fondness for off the wall radical solutions. We remember during the COVID epidemic where he was advising people to inject themselves with antifreeze and other weird medicines. It's not a medicine.
Yeah, bleach or something he's talking about is ridiculous.
Well, bleach, antifreeze.
He's not even embarrassed talking about these things.
So he listens. Trump is surrounded by a little galaxy of radical advisors and
Yeah.
thinkers, and he
And I think
listens
it's even
to a
worse
lot.
now with like Elon Musk and all of these people that he's got around him now. Very powerful people, and very opinionated people.
Yes, Musk at least has some credibility because he built these wonderful companies and is doing a great job. The bureaucracy needs to be cut down. I'm just writing my new column about the Parkinson's law. That they've got to cut down. Bureaucracy will keep growing, growing, growing unless you cut them back.
Yeah.
They're like weeds. And that's what Trump is doing. I mean, Musk is doing. But they're
I
not
think that
doing
is
it
so
very
true.
politically.
I think you're right. And even like US military is just so overstretched with bases, like you were talking about Germany, bases everywhere. And it's just unsustainable. So someone does need to kind of shake everything up. But the shaking up is not going to be a pretty thing to watch.
In the military, we used to use the term tail to teeth ratio. And that means in the military that the tail is the bureaucratic administrative, and teeth, of course, is the fighting end of the army. And the tail ratio is getting bigger and bigger with these groups communicating with each other. And it becomes very difficult to get anything done.
Yeah. How do you see the relationship between Trump and Musk? Do you think it's going to last? Because what you're saying is absolutely right, but at the same time, they're both quite big egos. And also, some of these tariffs, when especially the tariffs go on China, it is going to help to hurt Musk to a degree.
Well, if we go by Trump's record, it seems like that one day they will have a big fight over some trivial issue, and Trump will then turn violently against Musk and kick him out and take away his White House pass, and send him into the darkness. So that's typical of Trump. He does it with all the people he works with and humiliates them in public while doing it.
Yeah,
So I think we can expect that. Musk has to be careful.
yeah. And what do you think? Like previously, a part of me thinks that Trump is trying to clear the deck so that he can concentrate on his rivalry with China. But on the other hand, now the way he is dealing with Putin, I'm now beginning to wonder if in his mind he's thinking he can do like a grand kind of a deal with Russia, China at the same time to say that we have our own kind of spheres of influence and we work within that. How do you see the future, the near future between USA and China under Trump?
Well, I hope Trump's policies go ahead in that respect that you just described. There's a lot about Trump that rubs me the wrong way, but on the other hand, he stopped the war in Afghanistan
Yeah,
with a phone call. He is threatening to do the same thing in Ukraine, as we've been talking about, and he is on friendly speaking terms with President Putin of Russia and President Xi Jinping in China. So I think this is the best opportunity we've had for calm, great power talks, and
yeah.
for a sensible, non-warlike policy.
I've even heard that Trump um, wants to at some stage start dialogue talks with Iran, and maybe even there's been talks about like a possibility of having a U.S. embassy in Iran again.
That will eventually come one day. Right now, the Israel lobby has too much power in the U.S.
Mm.
It now runs American foreign policy, and Trump is 120% pro-Israel
Mm.
and financed in large part by contributions from his pro-Israel groups. So I doubt that there's going to be any love fest soon between Washington and Tehran. But it could happen. Trump is the kind who likes to do things like that.
Yeah, I think the photo opportunity with the Ayatollah and Trump, I think he might not be able to resist that.
You're quite right. He would love a picture of himself talking to Ayatollah. Listen, Ayatollah, you need to. Yes.
What about like BRICS? Because I think he is going to double down on like his um, opposition to the BRICS. So I think some of those countries are going to get under pressure. I'm just thinking, how do you think things are going to be between India, for example, and the US in the scenario where obviously they're trading partners, they're security partners, but at the same time, India's in BRICS with Russia and China.
Trump is very pro-Indian. His
Hmm.
administration loves Indians in India. And in fact, my belief is that they've embarked on a policy to cut down on Muslim immigration to the United States and replace it with Indians, Hindu Indians, coming in large numbers. They're flooding into the U.S., particularly in the media. So that's all hunky dory with the Indians and Trump, and they're ideologically they're very on the same wavelengths.
Yeah. Do you think that um, because USA has been trying to push India to um, to work against China, to build pressure on China, to surround China, um, do you think that will continue, or do you think that because China and India have had some kind of a rapprochement as well?
Well, I follow this with great interest because my first book, which was called War at the Top of the World,
Hmm.
is about the clash partly about the clash between China and India. And I predicted one day there would be a serious Chinese-Indian war.
Hmm.
So there's a diplomacy afoot to do something to improve relations. But the Indians and the Chinese do not like each other. They don't trust each other. And, a former Libyan foreign minister once said to me, he said, Eric, he said, all of the world's problems are the fault of the British. And, a slight exaggeration, but the point is that the British laid the basis for all these problems by their lousy border demarcation policies and leaving the Tibetan-Indian border undemarcated. So now nobody will ever go there. It's too remote. And I've been up there with the Pakistani army. And it's a real problem. And if we see a war between those two, it'll probably start there.
Yeah. It's amazing, Eric. I think you've been everywhere. You've been to KGB headquarters. You've been to remote areas between China.
I travel a lot. I've never been to Australia, unfortunately.
You haven't?
Never, too far away.
It's true. So, Eric, before we go, I'd like to know your thoughts about what's happening in Palestine, and obviously some of the crazy remarks that Trump has come up. But there's been some kind of counter proposal from Egypt in reconstruction, keeping the Palestinians, the people in Gaza, and starting reconstruction. So how do you see all of that? And how do you see the end of the conflict between Israel and Gaza?
It's a horror show. It's heartbreaking to watch the tragedy of the Palestinian people. I've been following it since I was a boy. My mother was the first Western journalist to go into the area, what the Israelis call Galilee, and to see all these Palestinians living in cardboard boxes and tents, and a whole population, 1 million people thrown out of their homes. Remember, the Israelis used to say, land without people for a people without land. But what a big lie that was, but very successful. I watched the thing with constant grief and heartache. I feel completely for the Palestinians. They've done a lot of stupid things, but they've suffered terribly. And they don't deserve it. They sheltered Jews during the Western European persecution of the Jews. So, and Trump understands nothing about that part of the world. He's surrounded by pro-Israel real estate developers, and hence this crazy idea to turn Palestine into the Riviera of the Middle East. Never mind, as I suggested in an article, why don't they move all the people out of Florida and give it to the Palestinians? They'll be happy to trade Florida for Palestine.
Yeah. That's the thing, because sometimes when Trump says these stupid things, you just don't know if he's just looking for a reaction or if he actually is taking this seriously, if this is actually what he thinks.
I don't think he knows what he's saying all the time. He just blurts it out, something he's seen on Fox TV. And it's horrible. I mean, the poor Palestinians, their fate is in the hands of these bizarre people who want to do ethnic cleansing and real estate development at the same time.
Yeah. There are talks that it is possible that Trump may want to go for a two-state solution in Palestine and between Palestine and Israel, but in doing so, to sweet the deal for Israel, he might actually annex more West Bank land and give that over to Israel.
I think that will happen no matter what happens. The Israelis are intent on building more housing. What started this attack that began on, when was it, September or whatever, the current fighting there, was an Israeli plan to build thousands of more housing development on Palestinian farmland.
Yeah.
And that's why Hamas attacked these Israeli locations. A very bad thing to do, but I just don't know what's going to happen with it. The Israelis are on a roll. They're gobbling up more territory. That's their ambition. They want to take over all of the West Bank and make it impossible for there to be Palestinian states.
Yeah, they're even going into Syria, and when they do take land, they hardly ever hand it back.
Yeah, you've noticed it's called salami tactics. You keep slicing a little thin, little piece. People like they're doing now in Syria.
Yeah.
He says anything. Nobody knows where these places are.
How do you see the future of the Abraham Accord? Do you think they might go back to that, or do you think that's dead in the water?
That was a political stunt, these so-called Abraham, and it brought together the Arab countries that are under U.S. control and influence anyway. I don't think it really had any meaning. But the real problem is that the Arabs are still doing now what they did in the 1930s and 20s, and that's stabbing each other in the back. You can look at the biggest Arab country, Egypt, which is colluding with the Israelis to torment the Palestinian people, keeping them locked up in the Gaza prison. It's been a shameful policy. And one day, Egyptian nationalists will come after Field Marshal al-Sisi and blame him for the misery of the Palestinians.
I was just listening to an interview by the ex-president of Pakistan, and he was talking about how he visited Turkey, and he was talking to Erdogan, and they were talking about how there's 5 countries that potentially could assume the leadership of the Muslim world, which is either Turkey or Pakistan or Indonesia or Malaysia, or the 5th one was Egypt. Egypt is a very important country, but it's completely it needs a complete realignment of the top leadership.
It is a ferocious dictatorship, and it's incredibly corrupt. And it's not run for the benefit of the Egyptian people. It's run for the benefit of the ruling class.
Yeah. Eric, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And it's lovely to see you again. We'll do this again soon. Look after yourself and stay warm.
Thank you. My best wishes to you.
Thank you, Eric.
Ramadan Kareem.